All right, good afternoon. Thank you for coming here a bit early. At 1 o'clock, we will have the Deputy Secretary General, Amin Mohammed. She will be joined by Leonardo Garnier, the Special Advisor to the Secretary General for the Transforming Education Summit, and Stefania Giannini, UNESCO's Assistant Director General for Education. They are here to brief you. They will be here to brief you on the Transforming Education Summit, which, as you know, will some activities will start over the weekend. Then immediately following that, or at least at 1 p.m., there will be a hybrid briefing here with the Executive Director of UNICEF, Catherine Russell, alongside Ugandan climate activist Vanessa Nakate. They will make a special announcement. Ms. Nakate will also brief reporters on her recent trip with UNICEF to the Horn of Africa. And I want to flag to you that the Secretary General's annual report on the work of the organization is out. The report represents our work to drive our common agenda, the Decade of Action for the Sustainable Development Goals, amplify climate action, promote gender equality, protect human rights, advance peace and security, coordinate humanitarian assistance, promote justice and international law, among other priorities. The report also provides an overview of our system-wide efforts to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. I encourage you to look at the report. Our colleagues have done a really great job, not only in print, but also online with lots of graphics, photos, and maps, and it's at un.org/annual report. Turning to the Secretary General, he spoke this morning at the General Assembly's Remembrance event for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. On behalf of the United Nations, the Secretary General conveys his sincere condolences to the Queen's bereaved family, the government and people of the United Kingdom, and the wider Commonwealth. The Secretary General described the Queen as an anchor of stability across decades of often turbulent history. She was a consummate diplomat, he added, and often wielded her skills as the only woman in the room. For 7 decades, Queen Elizabeth transcended her role to connect the most human level with everyone she met, world leaders and ordinary people alike. The Queen's legacy is an inspiring example of leadership that serves, the Secretary General concluded. Turning to Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues there are telling us that they're continuing to expand the response to reach people impacted by the war, including those close to the front lines and in areas that have recently shifted control back to the Ukrainian authorities. Over the last couple of weeks, we, along with our partners, have delivered about 1,400 shelter kits, 35,000 food kits that have been distributed by the authorities to families in villages of in villages in the Khersonska Oblast. Each food kit has enough food for one person for 1 month. Until recently, these villages in the Oblast were inaccessible for humanitarian workers due to hostilities. The deliveries follow requests received by the humanitarian coordinator, Denise Brown, during her recent meetings with the authorities in different areas of eastern and southern Ukraine. According to Ukrainian authorities, the main needs of people living in these areas included shelter, food, water, and specific supplies for the cold season, which has already begun in Ukraine. And this morning, the Security Council held a meeting on Armenia and Azerbaijan. The Secretary General's, the Assistant Secretary General for Europe, Central Asia, and the Americas in the Department of Political Affairs, Miroslav Yencha, briefed council members. He said that yesterday evening it was announced that a ceasefire had been agreed starting at 8 p.m. local time. Mr. Yencha said, "We welcome this agreement and hope the ceasefire will hold." He noted that both countries have written to the Secretary General and the Security Council alleging violations of the ceasefire brokered by Russia back in 2020 and of their territorial integrity. We are not in a position, however, to verify or confirm the specifics of these reports, but we remain deeply concerned over the dangerous escalation, including possible impact on civilians, Mr. Yencha told the council members. This afternoon at 3 p.m., there will be a briefing on the protection of civilians in armed conflict. We expect the briefers to be the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, the Executive Director of the World Food Program, David Beasley, and the Food and Agriculture Organization Chief Economist, Maximo Torero Cullen, who I think we've had here a number of times. Couple of other notes I wanted to share. One on Yemen. Our colleagues in Yemen tell us they are concerned about reports of the confiscation and destruction of civilian-held land and farms in Houthi-controlled areas in the district of Bait al-Faqi, south of Hudaida. Reports of civilian casualties, detentions, and forced displacement among the residents of these villages are very disturbing, and we are taking our steps to verify these disturbing reports. We remind the Houthis that they should act in accordance with international human rights law. And from Uganda, the team led by, our UN team led by the resident coordinator, Susan Namondo, continues to support authorities to tackle the impacts of climate change and restore degraded forest lands. In the northeastern regions of Karamoja, which is affected by climate change-induced drought and food insecurity, we've helped rehabilitate 122 hectares of land. We're also working with our partners to help nearly 42,000 farmers across 33 districts. We're helping in areas including improving irrigation systems on clean energy and saving technologies, such as the use of biogas. And the UN is boosting the capacity of animal health institutions with veterinary epidemiology training. Under the program, we have empowered veterinary professionals as the first line of defense to strengthen their preparedness, detection, and rapid responses to diseases. Today is an important day. It is the International Day of Democracy. You remember democracy, yes. Today is the International Day of Democracy. In a message, the Secretary General notes that across the world, democracy is backsliding, civic space is shrinking, distrust and disinformation are growing, and polarization is undermining democratic institutions. He notes that this year's theme focuses on the cornerstone of democratic societies, free, independent, and pluralistic media. He points out that attempts to silence journalists are growing more brazen by the day, from verbal assault to online surveillance and legal harassment, especially against women journalists. The Secretary General stresses that without a free press, democracy cannot survive. Without freedom of expression, there is no freedom. He calls on all to join forces to secure freedom and protect the rights of all people everywhere. And lastly, just a programming note, tomorrow at 11:15, the U.S. Permanent Representative of the United States of America, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, will be here to brief you on the U.S. priorities for the General Assembly that had been scheduled for today. It will now take place tomorrow at 11:15 in this very room. And my guest at the briefing tomorrow will be the chief of the treaty section in the Department of Legal Affairs to give the regular annual update during the GA of the treaty that we expect to be signed and ratified. And the head of the treaty section is David Nanopoulos, David Nanopoulos, and he will be here. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of questions. First, on the Secretary General's talks with President Putin following up, is there any timetable on when the possibility of shipping Russian ammonia through the Black Sea might take place? Are we talking about days, weeks, months?
Time frames is something that I tend to stay away from because I usually get them wrong. But I can tell you that the discussions are going on actively. Rebecca Greenspan, who spearheads our efforts in this regard, will be heading off to Brussels, I think, today for talks with the EU. We're speaking to many other players in this realm in order to get things moving.
Okay, and are we going to be getting a schedule of all the events taking place next week here in the building and the Secretary General's bilateral meetings?
The short answer is, of course, yes.
When?
That's the other question. My office is working on the week ahead. We'll send you all the links to the various programs. Important to note that there will be no kind of none of the side events we usually see at headquarters, sponsored either by agencies or by member states. Those side events will take place off campus. This all due to the COVID restrictions. So we'll flag to you what we know is happening. We'll flag to you some of the events that are scheduled to take place here that the Secretary General is hosting, whether on climate change, on the global crisis response. I think there's a Sahel meeting and others. So we'll send you that schedule. It will not come as a surprise to you if I tell you that my colleagues who do the scheduling for the Secretary General are working more than 24 hours a day, given the fact that everything that had been lined up has to be kind of rejiggered, given the change of travel plans of a number of heads of states and governments and foreign ministers. I hope they will survive the next 24 hours as they work on the SG schedule, but as soon as we have an idea of these bilaterals, we will share them with you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Miriam. Yes, sir. Yeah.
The Taliban claimed and announced that they killed 40 resistance members in Panjshir, and the videos that we received shows that they opened fire on these people in Panjshir. Have you or the Secretary General received any report on this matter?
We've seen so far the media reports, which I think are concerning, but we've not been able to, as far as I know, to confirm these reports. But I know our colleagues in the mission are trying to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, Natalia.
Hi, Stéphane. Today, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, he met with the newly appointed coordinator of the UN-Ukraine system, Denis Brown, and he thanked for the humanitarian aid, and he called the United Nations to join to the reconstruction of Ukraine. Any comments on that?
No, this is part of Ms. Brown's regular interaction with Ukrainian authorities. As you will recall, there was a meeting, I think, done in Lugano in Switzerland a few weeks ago, a few months in the past, where I think Akim Steiner and others from the UN were represented. Obviously, these are issues that we're in touch with with the Ukrainian authorities. I think when our concerns are obviously with the immediate humanitarian situation, the winterization, given that the cold weather is already starting to arrive, and then obviously the issues of reconstruction will also be discussed. Yes, ma'am.
Veronica from
Yes.
also DAC. I want to ask a couple of questions. First one is about yesterday's attack of Russia on the dam in Kryvyi Rih, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. It's a war crime, and I would eager to know whether the ongoing war crimes of Russia is going to be addressed in this session, and how. And this specific one, because Kryvyi Rih is the city of 700,000 people, and Inhulets River is flooding the area right now. And another question is about Olenivka. Secretary General also said that the investigators won't face any obstacles. However, nobody's saying whether they already entered Olenivka.
No, so
or not.
let me take your last question first. I think the message from the Secretary General from his conversation with President Putin was very clear, is that it was agreed that the investigators, the members of the fact-finding mission could enter from whichever direction they choose. That obviously is speeding up the planning process. As soon as I have some details on the travel, I would let you know. But they've not, just to be clear, they've not crossed into any area as of today. On your previous thing, I mean, we have seen throughout this conflict the destruction of civilian infrastructure, which goes against international humanitarian law, and we've spoken out against it. Now, obviously, the issue of Ukraine will be, I have no doubt, will be mentioned by a number of member states during their discussions in the General Assembly and in the Security Council. I'll come back to Mario and then Patrick.
Steph, can you share with us any numbers on the participation next week? Any number of leaders you're expecting?
We had some, let me just put it this way, I had some numbers before the death of Her Majesty the Queen. Those numbers are being revised. I hope to have something for you either later today or tomorrow. Patrick.
Good afternoon, sir. Question on monkeypox as it relates to Africa. As you know, in July, the UN Health Agency designated monkeypox as a global emergency and called upon the world to work with African nations to make sure there's no vaccine inequality regarding a vaccine. However, none of the wealthy European or Western nations have shared vaccines or treatments with Africa to date. So monkeypox is declining in the West, but there's still no vaccine for Africa. Is this concerning to the Secretary General, and does he plan to address this?
The short answer is yes. And I think the issue of inequality, whether it comes to vaccines for COVID, whether it comes to vaccines for monkeypox, whether the way countries have been able to address the economic fallout of COVID, access to funds, debt relief, all it's inequality across the board. And I think coming in a relatively short time after the COVID pandemic and the inequalities we see with the COVID vaccine, it is extremely concerning to see that a similar trend developing with another disease like monkeypox. Okay. Gregory. Yeah, sorry, not from you.
Thank you, Stéphane. I just want to clarify, you mentioned, and the Secretary General also said that there are the ongoing negotiations to facilitate the export Russian ammonium fertilizers. So does it mean the negotiations are ongoing about the export such fertilizers through the territory of Ukraine, particularly through Odessa? Thank you.
There are discussions going on at many levels. There are ongoing, there are complex, they are delicate. I don't want to get into the details. What I do want to say is that the outcome that we want to see is the fertilizers being exported to the countries that need them the most. We saw, I think the Secretary General yesterday spoke about the situation in West Africa where people are planting less because fertilizer is too expensive or not accessible. And I think, again, I don't know what more I can say than what the Secretary General said yesterday, but this issue, we know that there are no sanctions on Russian food and Russian fertilizer. However, the export of those commodities exists within a larger context of sanctions, right? Which are sanctions on different parts and on the system as a whole, which are complicated, which involve a lot of players, and we're trying to work through the bottlenecks to ensure that the fertilizer is exported. Yes, sir.
Shadi Abdel Sater from the Al-Sharq Al-Awsat newspaper and from Dag Hammarskjöld Fellowship. You've just spoken about a ceasefire in Armenia, between Armenia and Azerbaijan. My question is, do the United Nations have a plan to send a delegation to ensure that the ceasefire will be respected?
No, there is no mandate for the United Nations to send in any sort of observation mission. There are existing structures through which Armenia and Azerbaijan have worked out ceasefires and cessation of hostilities in the past, and also existing structures for dialogue between these two countries. We encourage them to use those structures, but there is no UN mandate for for sending in observers. However, of course, the Secretary General will be continue to follow the situation very closely. You're welcome. Edie?
Steph, is there any effort by the UN to try and settle the conflict in Ethiopia, in Tigray? The Tigrayans apparently have said they're ready for ceasefire and talks. Is the Secretary General planning to speak to the parties?
I mean, the Secretary General and others from the UN have been in touch with the various parties. We are supporting the African-led efforts in discussions between the authorities in Tigray and the central government in Addis. I mean, I think we've heard the parties state clearly their commitment to a dialogue without condition. We would like them to demonstrate that stated commitment. I think it's a matter of urgency to see a cessation of hostilities. I mean, I think we've seen the press reports of very disturbing civilian casualties. Yes, welcome back.
Stéphane, regarding Armenia and Azerbaijan, forgive me if I do get bulletins on this online, but forgive me if I'm a few hours behind the times. Is there currently active fighting going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan? And if so, are there active efforts at implementing a ceasefire between the two parties?
George, I can only say what we've seen press reports of another agreement of cessation hostilities between the parties. As I told your colleague, we do not have any observers on the ground, so I think that's information you should get from the parties themselves. Pamela.
Point. There was announced, and there seems to be some rejiggering on this too, for a food security summit sponsored by the United States. Yeah. Now it may be other co-sponsors. That would be in UN headquarters, correct?
I think you'd have to. I do not think it will be at UN headquarters, but you'd have to double check with the organizers. I do not believe it will be in the headquarters.
Okay, and on the grain deal and the ammonia, the reports were that it had been purchased by a U.S. Headquartered commodities trader. Is there any? Can you confirm that, or is there any list of? I mean, does the JCC have a list of all purchasers, or those are not being made public?
Again, I think we have to be very clear. First of all, the JCC is there to coordinate the ships, the grain ships that are leaving 3 Ukrainian ports, right? It's not there to the center is in Istanbul. It's room, a lot of maps, foresight. No, I mean, because it was very moving to see. I mean, it's, Ukrainian naval officers, Russian naval officers, Turkish naval officers, and UN experts. They only manage the ships leaving Ukrainian harbors. They are not involved in the issue of fertilizers. Okay, no, but let me finish. The report, the way, there's been a lot of press reports. I think they were more in the conditional tense than in the present tense. As I answered, I think to Gregory, we're not going to get into the details until we're ready to announce solving a lot of the problems we've been working on.
All right. Just to be clear, from these reports, and yes, you're right, it's a proposal. Mm-hmm. It would go through one of the 3 Black Sea ports that are authorized, and it's just that the transaction makes it
It's
eligible.
very challenging for me to speak about the future. So, however, I will say that in a few moments, we're going to be joined by the Deputy Secretary General. So I'm going to ask you to sit tight for just a minute, and I'll be right back.